All right, settle down, settle down. Let's see what we have on the schedule today. Harry S. Truman, 33rd President of the United States, former senator from Missouri, the man who inherited a world war he didn't start and then made the single most consequential military decision in human history, and then went on the radio afterward and explained himself to the American people with the calm confidence of a man who genuinely believed he'd done the right thing. You have been selected, or perhaps volunteered yourself through 8 decades of historical documentation, to participate in today's fact-check program. Case number 00446, where corporate presents you with the statements you made surrounding your decision to drop an atomic weapon on a Japanese city, and we determine together whether those statements hold up under scrutiny or whether they were, as so many statements on this show tend to be, something else entirely. I'll be honest with you, Harry. This is a heavy case file. Take a seat. So, August 6th, 1945, the B-29 superfortress named Enola Gay lifts off from Tinian Island in the Pacific, and at precisely 8:15 in the morning local time, it releases a single bomb over the Japanese city of Hiroshima, and that bomb, a uranium gun-type device the engineers had lovingly nicknamed Little Boy, detonates at approximately 1,800 feet above the city center, releasing energy equivalent to roughly 13 kilotons of TNT, and in that single moment, 5 square miles of central Hiroshima are simply gone, flattened, incinerated, reduced to ash and rubble, and what survivors described as nuclear shadows, burned into concrete and stone walls where living people used to stand. 70,000 people die instantly. By the end of 1945, the confirmed death toll climbs past 140,000, and of those dead, approximately 90% are civilians, not soldiers, not military installations. Civilians, with an estimated 38,000 of them being children. Youch. Now, Mr. Truman, you went on the radio on August 6th, and you said, and I'm quoting you directly here, "We have used it in order to shorten the agony of war, in order to save the lives of thousands and thousands of young Americans." And look, I'm going to be honest with you. That framing is doing an enormous amount of work. So let's actually examine the military situation Japan was in by August 1945. Because I think a lot of people never really appreciate just how badly the war was already going for Japan before Little Boy ever left the Enola Gay's bomb bay. American forces had already firebombed 67 Japanese cities before Hiroshima. The Japanese Navy was effectively destroyed. The Air Force was running on desperation and suicide missions, and an estimated 300,000 Japanese civilians had already died from conventional bombing and starvation. And yet here we are, reaching for the most powerful weapon ever built. The argument you made, Harry, and the one your military planners made when they briefed you on this decision, was essentially a casualty calculation, and American intelligence intercepts had revealed that by August 2nd, Japan had already deployed over 560,000 soldiers on the island of Kyushu alone, plus thousands of kamikaze aircraft and suicide boats positioned to meet an Allied land invasion, and the projected cost of that invasion, Operation Downfall, was somewhere between 400,000 and 800,000 Allied dead, with Japanese fatalities potentially reaching 5 to 10 million people, which is an absolutely staggering number that genuinely changes how you look at 140,000 dead in Hiroshima depending on which column you're willing to put it in, and that's the uncomfortable arithmetic at the center of non-popular status for a long close, or asking for students of the first time just free history, and acting theories of Rajadas who make the first time and Gano that genuinely changes how you look at 140,000 dead in Hiroshima depending on which column you're willing to put it in, and that's the uncomfortable arithmetic. This entire debate. Strike one for the "we had no other option" argument. The Allied powers had actually issued the Potsdam Declaration on July 26th, 11 days before Hiroshima, demanding Japan's unconditional surrender and warning of, quote, prompt and utter destruction. And Japan's official response to this ultimatum was something called mokusatsu, which translates roughly to treating it with silent contempt, meaning Japan's government did not formally reject the declaration, they simply declined to acknowledge it, which in diplomatic terms reads as "we are not surrendering, have a nice day, goodbye." Strike two. The Soviet Union declared war on Japan on August 8th, 2 days after Hiroshima and 1 day before Nagasaki, and then immediately invaded Japanese-occupied Manchuria, which was a catastrophic shock to Japanese leadership because Japan had been quietly counting on the Soviets to potentially broker a negotiated peace. and that hope evaporated overnight. Strike 3. Nagasaki on August 9th. Another 74,000 dead by year's end. And Emperor Hirohito himself does something completely unprecedented and intervenes directly in the surrender debate. Here's the part that rarely gets explained with the detail it deserves, because what was actually happening inside the Japanese government during the 6 days between Hiroshima and the formal surrender announcement is one of the more fascinating and genuinely terrifying case studies in political paralysis under catastrophic pressure. Japan's leadership was not a unified cabinet calmly weighing strategic options. It was a fractured and deadlocked group where the military faction was still arguing, even after 2 atomic bombs and a Soviet invasion simultaneously, that Japan should mobilize every last civilian and soldier on the home islands and fight to total annihilation rather than accept surrender. And Emperor Hirohito, who was politically expected to remain above government decisions and simply ratify whatever the cabinet decided, found himself staring at a deadlock that nobody could break except him. And on August 10th, he broke with every precedent and demanded surrender, citing specifically what he called a new and most cruel bomb, when he addressed the Japanese people on August 15th. So was it the bomb that forced Japan's surrender, or was it the Soviet entry into the war? Or was it the internal political deadlock finally breaking under the weight of all of it together? This is where historians genuinely disagree, and I'm not going to stand here and pretend there's a clean answer because there isn't one. But here is what the documented record actually shows. Japan did not decide to surrender the day Hiroshima was destroyed. The government met, deliberated, and continued fighting internally about what to do. It was only after the Soviet declaration of war and the Nagasaki bombing together that Hirohito personally intervened. And scholars like Herbert Bix, who won a Pulitzer Prize working from internal Japanese records, argue that the emperor and his cabinet were arguably more afraid of a domestic military coup or popular uprising than they were of further atomic bombing. And the bomb gave them a politically usable justification for surrender that even the most fanatical generals couldn't really counter. Because you cannot tell a population to keep fighting after 2 of your cities have been atomized and the Soviets are simultaneously pouring across your northern borders. The human reality on the ground in Hiroshima, and I want to stay here for a moment because the numbers become very abstract very quickly, and that abstraction is useful for certain arguments, but it is not honest. The bomb detonated over a city of roughly 350,000 people at 8:15 on a Monday morning when people were commuting and children were arriving at school and doctors were opening their clinics. And within 500 meters of the hypocenter, survival was essentially zero. Within 1 kilometer, approximately 90% of people died. Bronze statues melted, roof tiles fused together from the thermal pulse. Exposed skin on the arms and faces of people miles away burned from infrared radiation before they even registered a sound. And for those who survived the blast itself, the radiation sickness arrived in the following weeks and months, and then the leukemia and cancers came in the years after that. Meaning little boy kept generating casualties long after the smoke cleared. 12 American prisoners of war were also among the dead in Hiroshima, which tends to get swallowed by the larger statistics. And the people of Hiroshima buried them with full honors, which is one of those small details that sits quietly in the historical record and says quite a lot about the people who were on the receiving end of this particular decision. Going to be honest with you, Harry, the argument that the bomb saved lives is not straightforwardly false. It is a calculation, and calculations like this one are haunted by the numbers you put on each side of the ledger. And the people who got to decide which lives went into which column were sitting in Washington, projecting invasion casualties for an assault that never happened, which means the counterfactual can never actually be tested. And that permanent uncertainty is the part of this that does not get resolved, no matter how many decades of scholarship pile up on top of it. The formal surrender ceremony took place aboard the USS Missouri, anchored in Tokyo Bay on September 2, 1945, with representatives from Japan and the Allied powers present. And that date is the official end of the Second World War. Approximately 3 weeks after Hiroshima, meaning the sequence ran: first bomb on August 6th, Soviet declaration of war on August 8th, second bomb on August 9th, Emperor breaks the political deadlock on August 10th, surrender announcement to the Japanese people on August 15th, formal signing on September 2nd, and somewhere inside that sequence is the answer historians are still arguing over. Thank you for watching. Like and subscribe.